We got gameplay for some promising looking upcoming games, big Ubisoft news, but of course we have to start with the biggest Xbox leak in history. Let's start with Project Brooklyn, the new Xbox Series X refresh that I think looks pretty nice. It reminds me of a Sonos speaker, but it won't have any improved power. So while it is a mid-gen refresh, the only upgrades include a 2TB hard drive instead of one, a USB-C front port, better Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and a new controller that should have some DualSense PS5 features. So basically, if you just buy the new controller for your current Series X, you will have a similar experience and still a disk drive, because this new Series X is adorably all digital, as Microsoft calls it internally. Now, I never used my disk drive on the Series X and PlayStation 5, so it's not an issue for me, and I looked it up, and 72% of console games sold in 2022 are now digital. And Nintendo is keeping that number down, like a lot of people still buy physical games for the Switch. On PlayStation and Xbox, it would have been a way higher percentage. So it's only hurting a small percent of the audience. Like, let me know if you still buy physical games in the comments, I'm curious. But yeah, it's interesting because many credible rumors suggest that Sony will do a more powerful PlayStation 5 Pro next year. So it will be weird to have two new consoles launch next to each other, maybe even costing the same, as the new Series X should be $500, but then one is clearly more powerful. And then at the end of 2028, we should expect the next Xbox with cloud hybrid games, so that a game will not only leverage the technology of the console, like what is happening now, but also use the cloud and leverage that power for more impressive games. So where now we are stuck with the same hardware for 8 years, with this new model we might see more significant improvements to games over the course of the generation, because the console is just one part of what brings the game to life. I think it's pretty interesting and might be a bigger jump than what we saw this generation, and by the way, Sony is also expected to launch the PlayStation 6 in 2028. Now this is also wild, the full lineup of upcoming Bethesda games have also leaked. Now, this is from 2020 and seems that everything has at least been pushed by 2 years, looking at Starfield that was first planned for 2021, but of course just came out. So keep that in mind. It's in particular interesting to read some of the games they got planned, like Dishonored 3, so the Deathloop team is seemingly returning to that franchise, which is awesome. We see Doom Year Zero, so that's probably the next game from it. I loved Eternal, so bring it on. We see an Oblivion remaster, Fallout 3 remaster. I hope it's more than a remaster, that it also has like some big gameplay improvements. Now the only title that I don't think will happen from this list is the Ghostwire Tokyo sequel. Like, this was made before the game was out, and it of course did not do very well. So I think Tango is going to do something else. We see that the Indiana Jones game was for 2022, so 2 extra years would mean 2024. I can totally see that happen. But they also have another licensed IP game. And if we look at another chart next to it, we see the estimated revenue per title. And this licensed IP game should make 225 million in the first year, which is almost the same as they expect for Indiana Jones. So I'm really curious what this licensed IP is that they got coming. Your theories are of course more than welcome. And don't expect these games on PlayStation, by the way, as we also had this image for Elder Scrolls 6 where we only see Xbox and PC, just like 2026 or later. I think it's probably going to be later, but we will see. Like, there's a ton in this leak. One more highlight before I move on. You see the list here of prices that Microsoft thinks publishers will ask for their games on Game Pass day one. Assassin's Creed Mirage, 100 million. Suicide Squad, 250. Jedi Survivor, 300. Mortal Kombat 1, 250. So this is probably why we will never see these big AAA third-party games on Game Pass day one. Microsoft made $3 billion in revenue from Game Pass in 2022. So if they would pay this much for just one game next to all the other costs, that would make things just not very profitable. So I'm curious to hear all your thoughts in the comments. There's way more to go over, and if you like these news roundup videos, then totally leave a like. That would really help me out, and subscribe because I post one of these every Sunday. Now moving on to some big Ubisoft news, as they casually announced that The Division 3 is coming, and this is on one hand kind of surprising because The Division 2 did not meet sales expectations on consoles back when it launched in 2019. So then they decided to not support the game for a long time, but then later picked it back up, and now it's actually doing pretty well for them. We also got Resurgence coming, the mobile game that got a big spotlight during the Apple iPhone 15 presentation recently. It's slated for early 2024, and every year we get a new update on The Division Heartland, which is also free to play but for PC and console, and has more survival elements instead of focusing on the RPG aspects. They're taking their sweet time with this one though, but it should launch somewhere later into 2024. While the paid Division 3 will probably be 2027 at the earliest if I had to guess, because there's also another interesting part about this news. The Ubisoft blog, namely mostly focused on Julian, who has been appointed executive producer for the Division brand. He was an associate creative director on the first game, and then a full-on creative director on Division 2. And now his core focus is to build a team for the Division 3, which will be led by Massive Entertainment, while making sure that the Division 2 remains well supported. Julian right now though is the creative director on Star Wars Outlaws, the open world scoundrel game that looks really awesome and should be out in 2024. But yeah, this makes me think that the game is actually pretty close to being done. Like, why announce that Julian is going to do Division 3 if that is more than a year from now? Like, internally Ubisoft is I think aiming for a March date, but I can see it slip till like April, May, which is still faster than I initially expected. Avatar is of course also still being worked on by a different team inside Massive, but it will be out very soon, December 7th. So while some people stay on that game for the post-launch, I can see of course also them moving on to the Division 3. Now, more imminent are two very promising games that got new gameplay this week and are totally on my radar, starting with Banishers, Ghost of a New Eden, the new game from Donut, the Life is Strange makers, and more recently Vampire. Seems like they totally got a bigger budget for this game. Like, I'm low-key getting God of War vibes from it. The story is way different though, as we follow two lovers and spirit hunters called Antea and Red. Only early on in the game, Antea dies and becomes a ghost herself. So now Red's goal is to bring her back, but that might have a steep price. Like, we can sacrifice the life of others, which might mean helping Antea, but just like in other Donut games, choices should have a huge impact, even completely changing the world. But the combat looks pretty interesting too, as we can switch between both characters and even combine their powers for some pretty cool combos. Now, it doesn't always look as fluid though, which was also the case for Remember Me, which is like one of the earlier games they did, so I hope it feels good to play. But yeah, overall, I think it looks really solid. The November 7th date might hurt it though, like I hope people still have money left over after that crazy October, but I plan to give it a shot for sure. We still don't have a date for Dragon's Dogma 2, but it also looks really great. Like, we got new gameplay during Tokyo Game Show, which was totally the highlight for me, and it was playable there as well, so I totally think we are looking at a first half of 2024 date for this one for sure, maybe even early 2024. Now, the trailer totally showed some open spaces we can explore, but it mostly focused on the 4 classes called vocations. They're all pretty standard. You got your fighter, the warrior character, the archer for the bow playstyle, the mage that can heal and do powerful spells, and the vast and agile rogue. But they also showed advanced vocations that combine these powers. Like the Mystic Spearman uses the spear to easily hit multiple enemies. Looks very satisfying, but can also use magic for dashes and long-ranged attacks. Or we all see an archer that uses magic to bolster their shots. As always, the creatures look really great, can't wait to fight them, and traveling in the dark will still be extra challenging, just like the first game. Seems like they really just expanded upon the original in every way. So again, I'm totally curious. This coming week, Phantom Liberty for Cyberpunk is out. We've been playing and we'll do tips and tricks here on the channel. The big update with a lot of changes is already out and we already made a video on that. So a link to that will be in the video description. Mirage is coming very soon, October 5th. So expect some final pre-launch videos with new gameplay and info on the channel. And there might be more other content with, of course, at the end of the week, another one of these weekly news roundup videos. So subscribe to not miss anything. A like would really help me out. And check out the last week's Sunday video by clicking on the screen. I will speak to you very soon. Goodbye.